The world of UK medical training is pretty fraught right now. There's a lot going on, everything is kind of collapsing around us. But one of the major outcomes of all of this is that we are simply not training enough doctors. Almost by whatever metric you use, the UK is relatively under-doctored. And you, as a practicing doctor in the UK, especially a newly qualified one, need to be able to navigate that. Today's video is also being sponsored by Doctorsnet.uk, and I'll tell you more about them towards the middle of the video. And one of the most important things you can realise, I think, as a newly qualified Foundation Year 1, Foundation Year 2 doctor, is that a huge amount of doctor work that takes place within the NHS, and soon to be the majority amount of doctor work, takes place outside of training programs. And once you realise that, that comes with a fair bit of security in knowing that not only are there posts available for doctors outside specialty training, but lots of different types of jobs that doctors do outside of training that we simply have never thought about before. This is a video aimed at foundation doctors who are thinking about what they might want to do after the foundation training programme, whether that means going into specialty training or doing something else. It's really important to be aware of what is out there and the types of things that you might be able to do. And that's true whether you're not dead set on a particular specialty yet, you want to spend some time doing something different, getting more experience in a specialty before applying, or simply taking some time out. All of these things are fine. It is worth noting, however, that this video won't cover roles outside the UK, although that is something that a lot of people do. They go to places like Australia or New Zealand. It simply won't be possible to cover that within the context of this video. And it's also not an exhaustive list. There are so many really cool, exciting, interesting things that people do. This video is about the common ones to give people a flavour of what is out there. This is more about sparking ideas and giving people some general direction about where things might be going. So the simplest example to start with is the Junior Clinical Fellow, or the JCF, the Trust Grade SHO. They all describe broadly the same thing. They are a form of what is called a locally employed doctor, an LED, working as an SHO in one department for a longer period of time. This is the simplest one, the easiest to understand. This is very similar to doing what you would have been doing in any department as an FY2, a foundation doctor, a fully registered independently practicing doctor. But because you're locally employed and applying for these jobs locally, you have a lot more say over which department you're working in and how long you stay there. These posts usually last somewhere between 6 and 12 months, so there's nothing stopping you doing a couple of these in a year if you want, and they're usually paid somewhere around ST1 salary. So they represent a really good opportunity to build more experience in a specialty or get a taste of a new specialty, and you're not taking a massive financial hit for doing so. It'll still be a relative step up compared to FY2. These will stand you in really good stead for applying for a specialty training post in the following cycle. The private medical counterpart to this is the RMO, or the Resident Medical Officer. These roles are very similar to what we've just talked about with a JCF or a Trust Grade SHO, but they apply almost exclusively in the private sector. What that means is that you will be working usually in a private hospital, or perhaps the private wing or ward of an NHS hospital. For example, I've just finished a year working as a Trust Grade SHO in neurosurgery in a London NHS hospital, but that hospital had a private ward which was instead staffed by RMOs, who would be doing much the same duties as I was doing on the NHS ward, but for the private patients on the private ward. However, they do differ slightly in that they have their own contracts, their own working conditions, and sometimes the expectations that patients can have can be significantly higher than in an NHS hospital because of the premium that the patients are paying for that private service. In this context, these jobs can offer some really interesting opportunities and specialty experience, but make sure that you are properly indemnified if working in this setting. Make sure you're unionised and read the contract very carefully to be sure you know what the expectations are going to be like. The risks can be high, but so can the rewards. The next most common example is the CTF, or Clinical Teaching Fellow, which, as the name suggests, is all about teaching, and most medical schools or medical school adjacent hospitals will employ a handful of CTFs, so it's very likely that all of us who went through a UK medical school will have come across a CTF at some point. The major difference here, as I'm sure you can imagine, is that these doctors have specifically allocated, that is job plan time, dedicated to teaching. And that is not something that you usually have as a doctor working in the NHS. Despite the fact that we are all expected to teach medical students who come to the ward, and we do our best to help them get the best experience they can, we don't get protected time or activity for this. We've got to fit teaching medical students around everything that we're already doing. And if a ward or a department is very busy, unfortunately teaching is the thing that falls by the wayside. CTFs are the answer to this, where they are the ones that are truly responsible for looking after the medical students and making sure they get great teaching. These are doctors that are specifically paid to work out the best ways of teaching students and execute them. That is to say, executing the plans, not the student. And these posts may also represent a split between educational and clinical work as well. So it's quite possible to develop your skills both in a specialty and as an educator at the same time. This is a fantastic kind of post for anyone interested in education, and as a perk, these posts will often offer postgraduate certificates in medical education or similar funded courses to make you a certified medical educator, which would then set you up very well both for a career in education and applying for further posts, or applying for specialty training. This is also quite highly valued. And I'm very pleased to say that today's video is sponsored by doctors.net.uk, the one-stop shop website for doctors of all grades. I very genuinely use doctors.net.uk every single day for my doctors.org email address, which makes me look very professional, and I get a daily dose of the latest medical news delivered right into my inbox, which you'll appreciate is very important, particularly at the moment when things are changing so fast. The education section has e-learning modules to improve your knowledge in a range of clinical areas, including ECG interpretation, imaging, and updates on the latest guidelines to support you in practice. For the audience today, make sure you go and have a look at the careers section to look for financial advice and support, job listings, well-being, and to read about other doctors' experiences, many of which are definitely on the weird and wonderful side and can give you some inspiration on where things might be going. Make sure to go and use my referral link down in the description to sign up to doctors.net.uk, get access to your free doctors.org email address, and access to the doctors.net.uk platform today. Thank you so much once again for sponsoring the video and keeping the channel going. The next one to discuss is a CRF, or a clinical research fellow. Now, analogous to the last example where someone had dedicated time for teaching, a CRF is the equivalent but for academic research. This is what I did for my own FY3 year, where I was on an 80-20 split. That meant that I was working 4 days a week in clinical neurosurgery, getting experience of the on-call, managing perioperative patients, and then 1 day a week dedicated to my academic research, where I was responsible for a number of things, but chiefly simulation and education research within neurosurgery, which tied to my academic interests. So again, another great type of development post if you're looking for more experience either in a particular area of research or a particular clinical specialty, ideally both. This does overlap slightly with people at this stage who might have started a PhD out with clinical medical training, who will also often be called clinical research fellows or training research fellows. Basically people who are quite early on in their career but have a substantive position, that is, they are being paid specifically to carry out academic work. Our penultimate example is the LOCOM SHO. This is what it sounds like: tending your excellent medical skills and knowledge to the highest bidder. What this means is that instead of working in a full-time employed post like you are used to doing during the foundation program, or indeed as you would be in a JCF or trust grade SHO type post where the trade-off is a fixed amount of money for a fixed number of hours per week on a regular basis, locum work is done on a much more episodic basis, day to day, week to week, but for a premium rate. This could, and does, mean earning a significantly larger amount of money for the same number of hours than your full-time colleagues would be earning for the same work. And that is a perfectly valid reason to undertake this kind of work, because although the days of long-term locums are rapidly drying up and are now basically non-existent in some areas, if you undertake locum work at a particular level, you are going to be earning paying 2, 3, 4 times the amount of money for exactly the same shift and exactly the same amount of work. The trade-off is the work is not as regular. It used to be the case that people could do this for 6 months or an entire year, earning triple the rate of their foundation counterpart. And while that's not really a thing anymore and shouldn't be relied on for long-term work, locum work will always exist in some shape or fashion. It might just be a case of travelling a bit further to get it, or being willing to work in specialties that are either very stressful, very difficult, or where people don't have the specialist skills required, or being flexible with the types of shifts that you'll pick up. The work is still there, you just have to be willing to look for it. And then lastly, the type of job that I'm going to label the development fellow or an out-of-program experience. This is a bit of a cheating catch-all term for a number of different programs and posts that exist, but they don't fit neatly into one single box. These are usually regional or national level programs that are intended to equip doctors and develop them with a new set of specialist skills that they didn't have before they started. And this is one that foundation doctors usually never think about and have no knowledge of, and I certainly didn't either until I was well out of the foundation program. But once you are clear of foundation, you are usually as eligible to apply for these schemes as anyone else. These include things like the NHS Clinical Entrepreneur Programme, being an NHS AI Fellow, the National Medical Directors Clinical Fellow Scheme, sustainability schemes. There are all of these programs that you don't really know are there until you go looking for them. Any one of a number of secondments, that is time away from clinical practice to develop skills in education, management, leadership, entrepreneurship, digital health and skills, etc, etc. But the key word to look for here is OOPE, or out of program experience. And while it is true that these are usually intended for or would be taken up by specialty doctors, those in training that would take some time out of training, build their skills and then go back into training as a registrar and take them up towards being a consultant, that is absolutely not required for many of these schemes. And the one I'm doing at the moment, National Medical Directors Clinical Fellow Scheme, just requires that you've done foundation and that's it. And often in the fine print you'll find that so many different types of doctor are actually eligible, so make sure to look. And if you're not sure, ask. Often for the right candidate, they'll give them the job. So thank you very much for watching, guys. Please be sure to hit that like button for me, leave a comment, subscribe, and let me know if you're thinking about taking one of these years out of training, or what your plan is, maybe if you don't make it into specialty training this time around. Thank you very much to Doctorsnet for sponsoring this video and helping keep the lights on. I love working with these guys. I use their services each and every day, genuinely, and I'm thankful they've been so supportive. Take care, and I'll see you next time.